The pride, passion, and pageantry of college football lives here. This is the Paul Finebaum Show, Hour 1 podcast.
We welcome you back to the program, and a busy one on tap today. Later on, Jeremy Blue will join us. You may have heard that name. He is one of the first people to really come after the NCAA with this NIL situation, and we'll talk to him about his odyssey a little bit later on. Seth Walder will do something we haven't done very often in the last 7 or 8 weeks, speculate on the actual college football season. Yes, I know all the questions remain, but he'll give us where the computers think the season will go. Also, Bill Connolly, some interesting retro reporting on the ways of yesterday in college football, and Dana O'Neill on some of the new spending concerns that everyone is facing during uncertain times. We hope you've had a good weekend. We begin the program with some very sad news from the world of sports. Don Shula, the NFL's winningest coach, he led the Dolphins to a perfect season, has passed away at the age of 90 years old. He died peacefully at his home. He has been one of the most influential people in NFL history. And he also had a number of kids who went on to some notoriety. His son Dave was the head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals, and his son Mike was the head football coach at the University of Alabama. He won 347 games and coached, of course, the Dolphins to that famous 1972 perfect season that has so many have gone after, and the Patriots seemingly pulled it off when they had another perfect season, but it was all for naught when they lost to the Giants in the Super Bowl. So he had a couple of other. He in all, he guided the Dolphins to 5 Super Bowls, and certainly a few losses along the way. But he made his mark with a couple of Super Bowl wins early on, and certainly a legendary figure. So that's where we are. We'll take your phone calls at 855-242-7285. 855-242-7285 is our number. Guests will start piling in here pretty quickly as a busy week is live and underway. We start with Greg, who is in Alabama.
Hey, good afternoon, Paul. Thank you for taking my call. And you led off with the story that I wanted to talk to you about, and that was the passing of Don Shula. And first of all, my condolences to the Shula family. And I, as a youngster growing up in Alabama, my senior year in high school, our marching band went to Miami to play at their 15th anniversary, and got a chance to meet Don Shula and Bob Greasy, and that was going to be Bob Greasy's last year playing, and he was gracious to us all. We got to perform before and after the game, and it was one of those moments I'll always treasure growing up as a Dolphins fan. And he just made such a mark on the NFL, and the Dolphins were one of those teams of the 70s. And one of the things that I really appreciated about him on the coaching side was that his ability to adapt to the changes on the field. When they took Dan Marino, they had been a heavy rush team, and he opened up the passing game and let Dan Marino do what he did, and it served them well over the course of that career. And he was just a monumental figure, Paul, and a really good human being, and he's definitely setting out the Rushmore of football coaches.
No question, and had the occasion, you may not have been around at the time, Greg, to interview him a number of times. Long before his career was over, I did. I don't know if I've ever talked about this piece. I did this in the mid '80s for a magazine, a sports magazine. I did a father-son profile of 2 fathers who had 2 sons playing and starting college football at that time, and both the fathers, one not very famous and one very famous, agreed to interview me, as the 2 sons did. I think you can guess that Mike Shula was the starting quarterback at Alabama at the time, and Don was the head coach of the Dolphins. But the other one's even more hard to imagine. The father was I believe, the head coach at some small school in the Midwest, and his son was the starting quarterback at the University of Michigan. It was a story about the Harbaugh and Shula families.
That's awesome. I was during the mid '80s. Of course, I was deployed, but
right.
Right before I went into sub school, I was home and got to see Mike Shula in his Iron Bowl win against Auburn, and he was at that time an electric player for Alabama, and his connection, of course, to his dad just made it all more special for me as an individual. And he's one of those, Don is one of those few coaches who lasted into the modern era of football and was successful. In 33 years of coaching, he only had 2 losing seasons, and that's something that's not talked about very often.
No, you're right, and unfortunately, it did not end well, but it doesn't end well for very many coaches. Termigator is in Tallahassee. You're next.
Hey, how you doing, Paul?
We are doing great.
Good. I come to pretty much eulogize Coach Shula. He really spotlighted the state of Florida before any of the college national championships, really, or anything. The Dolphins won 2 Super Bowls in a row, and they were the first NFL team to go to 3 Super Bowls in a row.
True.
And I'll tell you a little.
Listen, he was kind of a cross generational, where he was part of the old and new. He was quite an innovator of many sorts, but you always knew when he did what he did in the 70s that's what he would be remembered for, and of course that's exactly what we're talking about today. JR is up next in Maryland. JR, thank you very much for the call. Great to have you on.
Thanks, Paul. Let's see. I was reading an article where they quoted Dr. Brian Hainline from the NCAA. He's an NCAA doctor.
Right. He is their chief medical officer.
Yeah, and he said, what happens in contact sports like basketball or football when one of the players tests positive? Does that mean quarantine? And I think the answer is going to be yes to that.
Automatic.
So if you have... and if you're lucky enough to keep your own team healthy, and you play the first game, and after the week after the first game, you find out that one of the players on the opposing team tested positive, then you're going to have to quarantine your whole team and for 2 weeks. So, and no one's going to come in and play you after that if you've been exposed, because they don't want to get their players exposed. So you're going to have to quarantine. So one scenario would be you divide your team up into an A team and a B team. They're equal in caliber, and completely split them apart, where they live apart. They split the coaching staff up, and they train apart, they practice apart. And so if the A team plays, and if they have to quarantine because of the opposing team, then you've got your B team that can step in the next week and play for you.
Yeah, JR, I hate to run. We're up against a break, but we will talk about that as we get closer to the season. Your phone calls continue right here, and a couple of guests on a Monday.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
We welcome you back on a Monday. Great to have everyone there. And it's also great to welcome back to our program Dana O'Neill with The Athletic. And she has certainly written about many, many aspects of college athletics, including some of the issues currently facing the sport in the sports. Dana, thank you. Great to have you back on.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure.
Well, it's so interesting to think about all the things that we're going through, and also the financial issues. And you have done some very cool reporting here about what everyone is facing in this current crisis. Take us through what you learned, and maybe as important, where are we all going?
Yeah, I think my approach was like, look, everyone is talking about budget concerns, and they are legitimate. I mean, I'm not trying to discount any of them. And, I saw Cincinnati had cut men's soccer. And, I'd seen that some commissioners had asked for some relief from the NCAA about how many sports they could sponsor. And so I just started to kind of turn the table around in my head. Well, where are some places that these budgets have some fat? And I went through the NCAA reports that all these schools have to issue every year at the end of every fiscal year. And, I think people presume, rightly so, football makes all this money and therefore football kind of gets a pass. And I understand that to an extent. But when you really look at some of the line items in the budget, it's sort of ridiculous where some of the money is being spent. And you sit there and think, well, if not now, when? Might you look at this crisis and say, all right, at least for a year, let's cut back on the training table, or let's not have a bazillion support staff on the football team. And that was sort of my approach. So I don't know that other athletic directors are there yet. I mean, or will ever get there, because it's sort of the sacred cow, right? Nobody wants to touch those numbers, but there is fat to be trimmed.
Yeah, well, and you're right. You walk around the major football programs in the country, and we know where most of them are. Just look at the college football playoff every year, and they have room. They've run out of room for all the consultants. I'm not sure that that's really where the expense is, but you found that money is being spent. I saw a number in your article that especially with the University of Alabama, of course. They only have $107 billion budget for ongoing renovations at Bryant-Denny Stadium, and which brings me to a totally different issue. We're talking about everyone making their stadiums larger, better, and of course we don't know exactly how many people are going to be in any of these stadiums.
Right.
But I wonder how many of these programs, which we're spending like there was no tomorrow, now are going. They're not. Many are not even half done with their projects, are they?
No, they're not, and that's happening all over the place. I mean, I know Alabama, for one, certainly, as you said, is kind of mid-project right now. Obviously, you kind of can't leave it like the Coliseum. You got to finish it, so you can't leave it as a rumbling construction zone. But I'm sure at some schools, at least, you would think that these palaces that were getting constructed or renovated that had only been renovated maybe 5 years ago and now are costing more money. You're wondering, you can't undo what's done. But, we're all used to it. I think that was my point. We've all kind of gotten numb to what's done. And it's like, we report about, Clemson has, golf, little mini golf and lazy river and all these fun things. And we laugh because it's cool because Clemson wins. But then you step back and you're in this massive budgetary crisis and you're like, could they live without the lazy river for maybe a year? I don't know. I'm just thinking perhaps, cut that out a little bit or cut the training table so it's, you still get plenty of food. I understand that's student athlete welfare, but I don't think that was intended to be $2 million as it is at Kansas just to feed the football team on campus. I think those are the numbers I was talking about, just sort of the astronomical, unnecessary expenses, at least for the immediate future, if not the long-term future.
I know in your piece you talk about, I think one program may have been Oklahoma that paid the gymnastic coach nearly $300,000, which sounds enormous, but it really isn't when you compare it to what everyone else is making. I know that this was not your main project, but as you go through and talk to various people, what's the level of concern about having to start slashing not the lazy rivers, but programs?
Well, I think everyone says the same thing. It's the last thing we want to do. That's nobody wants to have, because they know the alumni and the fans that support those programs get really angry. Sandy Barber, the athletic director at Penn State, was at Cal when Cal tried to cut 5 programs, and the backlash was ridiculous to the point that the alumni came in and essentially saved those programs. So everyone knows that they don't want to do that, and they don't have to do that. But there's also this sort of, what else are we going to do after a while? And the other thing you can consider is, even if they don't cut a program, you can cut a program to the point where the budget, you slash so much out of the budget that it becomes almost impossible for it to function in a competitive way. I mean, so you can outright eliminate a program, or you can just sort of take little bites out of it so much that it's the same as cutting it out of your department. So I think there's a reluctance to do it, but I don't think there's a absolute refusal if necessary.
We're talking about budgets and certainly where college athletics are right now, and we haven't seen much of it, but we will. And just maybe to step back a little bit, Dana, just in the reporting, and you cover this sport every day. What are the various layers or levels of concern based on the contingency plans that we're all contemplating and discussing every day, especially in relation to college football?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of the one thing I think there is concrete agreement on is that they have to play college football within the fiscal year. So that means the spring is still a viable option. If they can play because budgets are done within the fiscal year, if they can play a college football season in some capacity in the fiscal year, it's not going to fix everything, but that is a save. That's a huge save for pretty much every institution out there. But the question becomes, what is fair and equitable? I mean, and those are the questions that no one has the answer to, because I think what the problems are, number one, what is good for New York is not necessarily going to be good in South Carolina. So, Syracuse may not be able to play football, but, Virginia Tech can. How do you make that work? And I think there's a recognition that, a fanless football stadium, if that's the worst case scenario and we have to go that route, at least we get the TV revenue and all that. That's important. You lose the ticket revenue. But there is also a recognition, at least among some athletic directors that I talk to, that football, yes, it's dollars and cents, but it's also a community thing. A lot of students attend programs or universities based on the community aspect of attending a football game. You take money out of their student fees to pay for all of these things, and there's no football season. It's not the end of the world for kids. They'll survive. But people are at least aware that it's not just dollars and cents you're taking away. It's a viable opportunity for other students. It's the economic impact for these small college towns who otherwise don't make a lot of money. So there's a lot. I don't envy athletic directors right now or conference commissioners. I really don't, because I don't think the decisions are easy, and we're all sitting here today wanting an answer for something that, frankly, nobody has the answer for, because there's no vaccine, there's no treatment yet. So it's an impossible question to answer, but yet they have to plan for every sort of scenario.
And this, no one is really tired of anything at this moment. We're tired of everything, but I am curious, Dana, in relation to that question, and we ask it every day here. You ask it, everyone asks it. But we're now in May. Yeah. I mean, you can't say we don't know for too much longer, can you?
No, I think honestly, I can't fathom how they don't come up with a plan in some way in place. The end of June at the latest. I mean, the way I look at it is I think of this, first of all, I'm a parent of a college freshman who hasn't moved out of her dorm yet. So going backwards, new students can't move into the dorms until my daughter moves out of the dorm, and that thing is clean like it's never been cleaned before, right? So that includes athletes. So until you get the current students out, the new students can't move in. So that's got to happen, which means those steps have to be getting done now. And then you can finally open the dorms up to other students, including athletes. And you have to get them physically trained and able and safe. So, yeah, I think, next month there's got to be some sort of a decision has to be made. And I don't know how they're going to make it. I honestly don't. I mean, I would hope that for once that, everybody gets together. I know, college football doesn't have a president, so to speak, but they sort of need to come to, I would think, a mutual agreement. I would hope that they don't do this. This is good for our conference, and the hell with your conference.
You better believe it. Dana, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. Great reporting, and be well. Thank you, and hope your child gets home soon.
Thanks, Paul. Take care.
Great to talk to you. Dana O'Neill joining us. Many more guests on this very busy Monday afternoon, including your phone calls next.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
You're not worth a thrill.
Oh, we are back. Great to have you here on a Monday. Pat in Georgia is up next.
I'm truly sorry to hear about Don Shula, Paul. I really am. I enjoy listening to the three amigos call in, and I think that you are indeed a very gracious host to all of your callers, including me.
Thank you.
Would you happen to remember the Flying Wallenses?
Yes, I do remember them.
Well, I've been thinking about them over the weekend. Their patriarch, Karl, of German descent, joined the circus at the ripe old age of 6, and they're known for performing without a net. And I got to see them at Tallulah Gorge in northeast Georgia and also in the Condado area in San Juan, Puerto Rico. But they took small, slow steps, and they had a 30-foot pole that they used to balance. And where I'm going with this, the 50 governors of our 50 states, I think they're on a high wire act right now. And I do not think that they have a 30-foot pole to help them balance. And I truly believe that the citizens of their states right now are performing without a net. And I say that to make the point to all of your listeners out there, and I'm one of them, that if we do not respect COVID-19, and let me repeat that, if we do not respect COVID-19, COVID-19 is going to kill you, or it's going to kill someone you love. And I'm sorry that that's the way it is right now, but I just think it's important that message get out there.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. And yeah, I've heard it all, as you have. I've heard politicians and ministers and lay people alike all say different things about it, and I've tried to allow all different views on this program without getting too hung up on what the right one is, because I don't know. I do know that in the end, you can only protect yourself and your family as best you can, and you hope that someone else out there is not making a foolish decision that will end up changing other lives. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, no, yes, you're absolutely right, and I know that you've heard this before, and you know about my family history, but the Hippocratic Oath is basically do no harm. And right now, I think it's tough for all of us to do no harm. It's difficult. It really is. Have you had a chance to think about what game day is going to look like next year, either for ESPN or for the SEC network?
I don't know. I mean, it's one of the better questions going, because certainly you can't do it the way it's been done.
Yeah, if you're in Athens, we're in the crowd. We've got signs. We're yelling and screaming. When the make noise sign comes on, we're jumping up and down. I mean, and if it's an away game, we get up in the morning and we turn it on at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock in the kitchen and in the inn. And I mean, it just leads up to kickoff. And
yeah, I really I'm sure the people in charge of those shows, and I haven't talked to any of them. I'm pretty far removed from that right now. Have to be concerned, but they also don't know what the schedule looks like of football. So I think as they get closer, I'm sure that those are critical programs. So I just don't. I'm going to sound like all these people I interview. I don't know the answer.
Well, I certainly understand, and thank you for taking.
I can tell you where I wouldn't want to be. In that it's at one of those crowds right now.
Well, that's a tough decision that people would have to make, and the feedback I'm getting is there's a lot of Georgians out there. By the way, we had a Blue Angels and Thunderbirds flyover Sunday afternoon. They flew over all the hospitals in Atlanta, and they went to Noonan and flew over a hospital in Noonan because our two grandsons got to watch them. They were standing in the hospital parking lot watching them fly over. But I think most Georgians are saying, well, I can do this, but I don't want to do it right now. I'm just not confident.
Yeah, I mean, until we get out of our homes, right? It is going to be hard to think about anything else. Hey, thanks, Pat. Jake is up next. Hey, Jake.
Hey, man, how's it going?
It is great. Thank you.
All right, I was sitting here thinking about you, and back long years ago, I was listening to the Eli Gold show, and there wasn't much talk radio or anything back then. But there was a guy that wrote in a newspaper, and he was the first one to come in and criticize Alabama and for anything. If he criticized Alabama for anything, he got murdered, But he kept going. He was real strong, and he filled in for Eli Gold one night. And I listened to him, and I have listened to you ever since. And I remember when Jim first came on your radio station, and I thought, what an idiot. And he's still proving that he is. And there were so many great people that
you know something about that? That was my first radio job. Eli Gold was a friend of mine. He was the voice of NASCAR at the time. This was before he did Alabama. And he would go to Daytona every week to do the NASCAR live show, and asked if I could fill in for him, and that led to a regular show called. You ready for this? You remember the name?
No.
It was called Fussing with Finebaum. And
right. Yeah.
It was, and let me tell you, it was a hardcore show, and a lot of people that listen now would not have recognized it. But there were no sacred cows on this show. It lasted about a year, and then I eventually left to go to another station. And I don't think I did a talk show for a couple of years until I started doing one in the morning. I'll tell my life history some other day, but you are absolutely right. That's how it all started. Hey, we're up against a break. Back with much more. Your phone calls are next.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
Though we're apart these days, we're sharing more. So at Geico, we'd like to say thanks. Thanks for sharing your savage dance moves. Thanks for sharing your DIY haircut fails. Thanks for sharing your inner lip sync star. Now it's our turn to share with the Geico Give Back, a 15% credit on car and motorcycle policies for current and new customers. Because we're committed for the long haul, the 15% credit lasts your full policy term. Visit geico.com/giveback for more info and eligibility.
Back here on a Monday afternoon. Everybody feeling great? Jim is next.
I'm going to try to stay calm, Paul, but it's not easy when you allow something that you know is a lie. The Bible says that deception will cause God to literally stop the world in the world because there'll be so many deceived. Even His elect will be deceived. That's what that's what's going on in America right now. But let me get to the point. This guy Jake had no knowledge of me or your show when I first got on this show, and yet he said he heard me the first day I got on the show, and he said I was an idiot then, and I'm still an idiot. You heard that, right?
I know you're not going to believe this, but I'm not sure I heard him say that.
Well, that's what he said.
I don't doubt that he did, but
let me go on with he started out saying, Paul, I heard your show from the first day Jim got on the show. Okay. He was an idiot then.
I was more thinking about what he said about the days with Eli Gold, so I probably missed that when I was talking to him.
I'm just trying to clarify, if you don't mind, and keep interrupting.
No, you can say whatever you want.
Well, maybe you can straighten it out, if you will, now. Maybe you can straighten it out. My first call, Paul, you raved about my first call. I know you remember it. I talked about Mike.
Yeah, I do. I do remember it. It was about 19 years ago, and you were calling. I believe. I talked
about Mike Dubose. I know it's about 15 years ago. I talked about Mike Dubose. Talked about a guy that told me to get on your show, and I told him I was reluctant. He said you'll like it, and so I went on and called you, and I did like it for a while. But the point is, that fool Jake is a liar. He never heard your show when I was on it, and for a fact, Paul, my first call you raved about.
Well, by the way, Jim, I have to tell you, I don't think I really heard what he said but that's okay. I remember talking to you it was around 99, 2000 after Mike Dubose.
No, it was 2003, Paul.
Well, Dubose wasn't the coach in 2003.
I know he wasn't, but I talked about him because you had gone.
But I thought you had called after when DuBose went around preaching, and I went to one of his sermons on a Sunday morning. But I could be wrong. Hey, I'm not as young as you, so.
Can I talk? Why do you keep interrupting me? May I talk?
I haven't said a word. Go ahead.
Well, you've said every time I start out, you start interrupting me. I called because a guy told me, I said, I don't want to call Finebaum. I've heard bad things about the guy. I love his articles in the paper. I love those articles. But I said, I heard he's definitely a hard guy to talk to, and he'll criticize and so. And the guy said, no, wait. He said, let me tell you what he did. He said he went and did a great interview with Mike Dubose's wife, and he cleared the air. And I said, okay. And he told me all about it. I said, well, it sounds good. I'll call him. That's why I called him. That's why I called you. And the first day I got on the air, even Phyllis called the next day and raved about me. Shane did, and you did. Now, that's a fact, Paul, whether you admit it or not. And I'm making a point. The point I'm making is, everybody knows that I might have sounded like an idiot since then, but I wasn't an idiot the first day, or didn't sound like an idiot.
No. I remember the topic, but I do not remember the year. So, because the article on DuBose's wife was in 1999.
Oh no, that's not what I called about 17 years ago. But the year is irrelevant. That guy didn't even know you existed, and he wasn't a caller of the show. So it's a lie what he made up. But the main point was, would you admit I wasn't an idiot the first time I called you?
I will raise my hand and admit that, yes.
Well, then that's clarified that fool just got on here like some of the other assholes and lied.
Okay. Yeah, we're wasting time talking about a caller that I've already forgotten 3 minutes after he hung up.
I'm not going to call your show about because of that. But anyway, I want to clarify that. Thank you.
Live from the capital city.
Yeah.
Cradle of Confederacy. Paul, what you just did there was about as cheap as a palm reader's trick on the side of the road with a big palm painted on a board. You don't remember anybody's first call. Now, if you're going to feed debate and say, well, I was talking about this, and guess I was wearing a white shoe. I was wearing a white shoe and a red shoe.
Well, I got news for you. I did remember his first call, the subject of it, and I thought it was 4 years earlier, but apparently it wasn't.
Well, but it didn't matter. I was listening to a caller earlier talking about the COVID-19 virus and people on a tightrope and everything, and I think we're going to be okay. I think what we've been through as a society in this country, that when people do start leaving their homes, I believe they've got a lot more respect for what's going on, because even if they've got questions, they're going to be cautious. And I believe we're all going to be okay. And will there be some issues? Probably so. And they'll be reported as issues, and people will believe that, and other people believe other things. But I think we'll be okay as a society with the practicing and the way we've lived for the last month. Paul, we was talking about Memphis the other day, and Memphis is a really cool little place for people to go visit. Memphis, when I was there several times, I got the feeling that I wouldn't mind living in the Memphis area, because there's a lot more going on than just Memphis. There's the suburbs, as opposed to maybe New Orleans. I like New Orleans, but I never got the feeling I wanted to live there. But Memphis was a cool place. And there's a lot going on at Memphis, and a lot of history and things going on. Would you agree with that?
It's a fabulous city, yes.
To go to some of the most predictable places. If anybody ever gets the opportunity, of course, you got Graceland and Sun Studios, all kind of things there. Go to where Dr. King was assassinated, because that will blow your mind.
Yeah, that is the Lorraine Motel. Yeah.
It will blow your mind. The closeness. If you've kind of followed the different documentaries and stuff and know a little bit about some of the details, it is shocking. It will stun you.
when you're back there. And if it doesn't grasp you by your heart and tug at you, then I guess there's other things to do. But, 50 years ago today, Paul, what happened?
Kent State.
Absolutely. And it's incredible that it was caught in song such in a way that it will always be timeless.
And Nixon's coming.
Yeah, and if you knew her and you found her dead on the ground,
it was an amazing time. I will tell you, I sat in Nick Saban's office one day, and he was a student on the campus that day, and he told me exactly what he was doing. He was having a hamburger at the cafeteria with another football coach. I can't remember which one, whether it was Gary Pinkel or somebody else. And he heard all the commotion. And for those who you certainly easy to find, but it was pretty amazing. Were they National Guardsmen? I think that's what it was.
Right, National Guard.
There were a lot of Vietnam War protests, and they just started shooting into the crowd. It was amazing.
See, you recollected that thought just like I remember it on the news. Mm-hmm. And I was just thinking while you were telling me that, just that instant as you were telling that story, the news that we heard then was news that we could believe in and we could trust it. Whether we liked it or not, we believed it and we trusted it.
We're up against a break. Back with more.